Welcome back to the Hubscale Podcast, the podcast where we dive into the minds of security leaders all over the world. Today we've got Jeremiah Grossman, the CEO of Root Evidence. Jeremiah, pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, Elliot. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Yeah, no, great to have you on, Jeremiah. And just for the listeners who aren't aware of who you are and your background and Root Evidence, would love to have an introduction by yourself.
Let's see. I've been doing cybersecurity for 25 years. I was a long time ago. I was one of those kids that you read about that hacked Yahoo. And instead of calling the FBI, they gave me a job. So I did that for a few years. And then I started a company that did very well called WhiteHat Security. I ran that for 12, 15 years, and I was eventually acquired. Then very shortly after, I went over to SentinelOne to help out as chief of security strategy for several years because I wanted to get out of application security and do EDR because I felt ransomware was about to become a thing, and we were right. After that, we focused on attack surface management with bit discovery. That was acquired very, very quickly. So I've been doing this a few times, and in the meantime, I've just been writing and speaking a lot about cybersecurity for most of my life at this point.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And I think there's not many folks in the industry who've had the background that you've had and the runs that you've had. What's kind of been your motivation throughout, really, Jeremiah? Just before going into the new business and some of the topics we want to talk about, I'd love to know, what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning, that stops you from, as you mentioned, sitting in Maui and enjoying your life and having a relaxing few years?
Yeah, for those that don't know, I grew up in Maui. I was running companies most of my career from Maui, so it's a cool gig if you can get it. It used to be my kids would get me up in the morning and providing for them. I have lots of different motivations and reasons for doing things, but what I personally like, what I find most satisfying, is I like focusing on solving very, very hard problems. The more impossible, the better. Particularly cybersecurity, since I seem to be good at it, because it's not just a technology problem; it's a social problem. It's a psychology problem, and so you have to be really clever in your solution. So I like solving problems. I like making new things, like companies, and I like giving people careers. So that's what I like.
Yeah, no, amazing. And I know outside and quite unique to yourself versus many other founders, you're actually a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well.
Yeah, so I like to quip, if we're in close proximity, I'll be okay with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai and things. But if any further than that, I got my computer. But more seriously, I got introduced to Jiu-Jitsu maybe 20 years ago, and it became like human chess. It was the hardest, most honest thing I've physically done, and I just kept at it, 3-4 days a week for 20 plus years, and started introducing other cybersecurity experts to it, and to have a good time. It's just part of my life.
Yeah, the black hat jiu-jitsu.
Amongst the many cool things I get to do, I get to host an event once a year, just after Black Hat, before DEF CON, where we get 60 cybersecurity experts on the mat, from white belts to black belts, and we train with UFC pros and world champions, and just generally have a good time. We call it Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Smackdown just because it's funny, it's overstated. It's just a really good time.
Amazing. And yeah, would love to talk about a few things today. One being the new business, Root Evidence. I think everybody saw this at Black Hat, and it's going to be quite exciting to talk about that today and the problems that you're solving and what's prompted you to build in the business, and then going through your entrepreneurial journey as well for those founders and prospect founders who are going to be listening to it today. Lessons that you've learned throughout WhiteHat, bit discovery, etc. But just starting off with Root Evidence, I know recently raised the 12.5 million seed, which was backed by our friend Roger from Ballistic Ventures. Talk to us. What's actually prompted you to found in this business, and what's the problem that you're solving?
So there'll be some simple answers, but the answers can go very deep. So we'll start very simple. If you look broadly at where breaches and losses occur in cybersecurity, not just breaches, just because you have a breach doesn't mean you have a loss, but the breaches and losses according to the cyber insurance industry, which I consider to have the best actuarial data in the world on this subject, they say about half of the losses are owed to phishing scams, business email compromise, credential stuffing, and things like that. So, the solutions to those problems are going to be EDR, MDR, MFA predominantly. The other half of the world is remotely exploitable CVE vulnerabilities, the things that you can patch against. And that's the other half of the world. And we have this very old industry, very old and unsexy industry called vulnerability management, which has a tremendous number of problems. And we're like, okay, we know how to scan for vulnerabilities. We know how to patch them. What's the deal here? And there's big companies. Why isn't this problem solved? So, our last company got bought by Tenable. So we talked with a lot of customers. We talked, for 2 or 3 straight years with a lot of companies, looked at all the products. And what we found is that the real problems that the industry had, no technology or company had a solution for. And we can dive into that, but it just seemed to me that if you're going to solve a really big cybersecurity problem with impact, vulnerability management was the one.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting. Yeah, because that there's obviously some of these larger players who've been around for quite some time, the Qualises, Rapid7. What is it that Root Evidence is actually doing that's going to differentiate from those traditional vulnerability management paradigms?
Yes. The only way to understand the solution is to appreciate the problem first, where when we look at a problem, at least when I look at a problem, an industry problem I want to solve, I really want to be the world's best expert in the problem first, not necessarily solution. I just want to know every aspect of it. So we spent 2 straight years talking with the biggest of the big companies, with cyber insurance carriers, all the way down 2 straight years, meeting after meeting, trying to understand this problem. Amongst the takeaways you find about the problem is there's about 300,000 total CVEs in the world. And it's not only a large number, but it's increasing every year by around 35 to 40%. It's a lot. But if you look at what is causing the losses, the breaches and the losses, only 1% of all CVEs have ever been exploited. You have to keep this in mind, because it's not just this year that's true. It was last year. It was the year before that, and the year before that. So here's the crux of the matter. If we're finding and fixing or focusing on the right vulnerabilities, then 1% number should have gone up, year over year. It should have been 2% and then 5% and on up. But clearly, if it's still pegged at 1%, we're not focusing on the real issues that are directly tied to loss. So, then in speaking with a lot of these companies that do vulnerability management, they're telling us that they're buried in more vulnerabilities that they can fix now or ever. That the current types of scanners that are available don't scale. Like they could scale 10 years ago, but not today with the more modern environments. Prioritization is a problem. Justifying the cost of fix is a problem. Like, should I patch this and spend the money to patch it? Does it make sense relative to the risk reduction? So all these problems sort of come up. And if you look at those problems very closely and you align them with the available products and solutions, you go, there's a complete mismatch. There's a hole in the market. And until something new comes along, we don't solve it.
Yeah. Did you see that when you were at Tenable, or has that mainly come post-Tenable through the conversations with the insurance carriers?
We had an indication that there was a flaw in the market somewhere while at Tenable, because clearly, we've had vulnerability management for 30 years, and 50% of everybody's still getting hacked, and everybody had these reasons why. Whatever was going on was not, the problem was not getting solved. So we knew the problem was there, but it wasn't really till after we left and spent a significant amount of time where we really figured out what we believe the true gaps were.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what is it specifically that, with the plan of Root Evidence since coming out, stealth mode, that you're going to be doing to solve that problem?
Yeah. So let's say we just look at the vulnerabilities in general. In speaking with, let's say, cyber insurance carriers that have a vested interest in fixing the right vulnerabilities at the right time, what you find in those markets is that, let's say what we know of in cybersecurity, 1% of vulnerabilities matter, just 1%. But if you talk to others, let's say digital DFIR people, those that respond to investigations, they'll tell you it's something between 20 and 300 per year. That's it. But that information isn't getting communicated to cybersecurity or vulnerability management for some particular reason. We're not sure why. So we need to focus on these vulnerabilities first and just the smallest subset. Then we have to build incredibly high scale and highly efficient scanning systems, because right now we're not scanning everything that matters, all the externally facing or internet facing assets, let's say daily, because there's two reasons. Like, why aren't companies scanning everything that they own externally daily? They'll say, we cannot bear on more piles of vulns that we're never going to fix, and it's cost prohibitive. So we surmised, as far as one of the conclusions, that if we can reduce the amount of reports that are sent to them, because the real important ones are smaller, we can start really solving the prioritization issue. And we have to decrease the unit cost of scanning. These numbers will be on a broad average, but if you look at the current products in the market, to scan a particular asset all year, broad average, $20 per asset per year. Now, if we're going to do that across all assets that matter, no one's going to pay for that. So the unit cost of scanning has to come way down. So the platform efficiencies of the scanning providers have to come way down also. So, and the third one I want to bring up, we need to help companies get their arms around what it will cost them internally to fix a vulnerability. Because ideally, what they want to say is, this will cost us $100,000 to patch and we'll retire 10 million of risk. Or this will cost us 10 million to patch and only retire $1 million of risk. That's worthy of a conversation. But vulnerability management only really speaks in color codes: red, orange, and green, or red, orange, and yellow. We need to speak dollars and cents, because the business has to invest in these in our guidance. They want to know, what do they get in return for doing what we say.
Yeah. And there's a guarantee as well, isn't there, that you've put in with root evidence?
At some point, we our team has a long track record of doing product warranties. We did it at WhiteHat Security for application security, meaning if you fix the vulnerabilities in the websites that we say, we promise you won't get hacked. Otherwise, it was the first of its kind. If you do get hacked, we'll cover the losses up to some amount. And we had to show efficacy data to our insurance provider so they would underwrite the losses. We took that model because it was very effective and people really liked it, over to SentinelOne, and we did the first ever ransomware warranty. So we did that as well. And then since then, myself and Robert Hansen, one of the others on our team, we've done a dozen product warranties and helped bring those to market. And this is really important to us, because if you really think about it, cybersecurity, with some authority, says to a company, do X, Y, and Z, and you won't get hacked. When they get hacked anyway, cybersecurity basically says, sucks to be you, nothing's perfect. And we don't think that's the right way to go about it. I mean, that just means we have a $250 billion industry garage sale where all sales are final. I'm not about that. I want to be able to convey to customers that we really believe that our product works and that we'll put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's very exciting. But why do you think that this problem hasn't been solved yet within the vulnerability management space?
Our best guess is that it's probably part of original sin and the culture. In the culture of vulnerability management, when you do a bake-off, your product versus their product, whoever finds the most high-profile vulnerabilities is the best, and that's who wins the deal. So there is a culture of more vulnerabilities equals more value. Just find more, just find more, just find more, check for more. And then all of a sudden you've created a problem called prioritization, and you've buried your customers in vulnerabilities. That might have been 5, 10 or more years ago. But right now, what companies really want is less equals more. If we're only getting exploited by 1% of the vulns, can you just tell me those? Start solving problems. Tell me what I should be fixing, how much should I spend on the fix, and allow me the opportunity to tell the business that I retired X amount of dollars in risk. If we do that, we succeed. But vulnerability management isn't yet used to speaking in dollars and cents, and that's one of the things we hope to change.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think it's kind of like the perfect playbook that you hear from successful businesses and successful founders is, find out what the problem is first, find out what the biggest challenges are, and then create the products and solution to those problems, rather than coming in and saying that you've got the best tech, the best XYZ, but no one really gives a shit about your product. They care about the problems that you're solving, and this is a perfect example.
Yes, they don't want to be breached. We don't want them to be breached. What is breaching them? And just go back to first principles. Just because it says CVSS 10 doesn't mean the adversary cares about it. The data we're looking at says is that the adversary is using vulnerabilities from 2025 all the way back to 2008 to do their work. They're using CVSS 9s, 10s, 9s, 8s, all the way down to 4. It's almost like our prioritization models in the industry don't work and the adversary doesn't care. So what I would like to do is focus on the vulnerabilities that force an increase of their costs, where they have to start exploiting brand new vulnerabilities. If we do that, that's an indication that we're winning.
Yeah. And what do the next 12 months look like for Root Evidence?
So right now we spent 2 straight years learning about the problem, working with companies, understanding their challenges. We came up with what we believe some very cutting edge solutions to solve these problems, to do all the things that I said. So we'll be working with our design partners week in and week out on what the product should ideally look like, to make it as simple, straightforward, and easy as possible. Because I think that's what everybody's looking for these days. It's a very sophisticated, complicated world. Everybody has competing interests. So you have to be laser focused on the problem that you're solving and make the solution easy. Look at all the dashboards and any vulnerability management product. It's overwhelming, even for the experts. So with their help, and that's really what we're going after. We have some ideas, but this is going to be an industry-wide effort on how we finally kick this vulnerability management problem. There's not going to be any one person, one company that's going to have all the answers. It's going to take a collective effort.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And I think it's going to be interesting as well how you're going to compete versus, as we've mentioned, the Rapid7s, Qualises, Tenables, who are not just in the vulnerability space anymore, are they? These are broader platform security vendors covering application security through to security operations, etc. How do you think that compares for Root Evidence versus these other larger players?
It's a good question. I think for us is that everybody's already going to have bought at least one of those products, and they're going to be buried in vulnerabilities, and they'll prioritize in some way. They'll fix some number of them, and they'll get hacked anyway. Our job is to just focus on reporting the vulnerabilities that matter. If you fix those, you won't get hacked. We're not saying you should turn off those services. If you like them, keep them. What we want to focus on is helping companies fix the right ones so they don't get breached, and have a warranty backup, in case disaster strikes.
Yeah. How does this problem and the scale of this problem compare to previous businesses that you founded before, like WhiteHat, for example?
There's different industries you can go in and different styles of businesses you can start. So WhiteHat went into the application security space before it was really a space. So what you endeavor to do is build a company and an industry at the same time. Share why this problem is important, something that no one has ever focused on, ever spent money on. So the benefit is it's not terribly competitive, but there's no budget assigned to it, which presents unique challenges. So you have to design the business and the strategy that way. Then with SentinelOne, that's in the EDR, / antivirus space, highly competitive, but also budgeted. So now all of a sudden you have to differentiate against your, very strong incumbent vendors. And how do you do that? It's very different than a nascent market. Then we did attack surface management. We went back into a nascent market with no budget. It was a big problem. We believed in it and we did well. So now back to vulnerability management. There's incumbent vendors out there, but there's budget to be spent. And we think people want to be able to do more and demonstrate more value with that budget. And that's what we're going to represent.
Yeah. And this is feedback that we've heard through the market for years now, isn't it? In terms of the problem with vulnerability management, hearing it from security leaders on the end user side, as well as other vendors who've been coming through as well. So no, it's super exciting. And you've obviously got the fundraising with Ballistic. How important is that for you?
Critically important, because So way back in the day when I'm running WhiteHat, Roger Thornton and his team, Barmac as well, we're over at Fortify Software. So we competed against them mightily. And so they know who we are. We definitely knew who they were. And so when we're going to take on a new industry, a new established industry, it's going to be hard to dislodge, hard to disrupt. And this technology that we needed to build was very difficult and very expensive. So we needed the type of investor who knew the market really well, were former operators or current operators, and then knew us well. And Ballistic checked all the boxes, and there wasn't going to be many investors that did. So it was a very good match. They got what we were doing very, very well. They believed in us, and then also, to their credit, they followed up on all their homework. They called everybody that we talked to see if they would tell them something different they told us, and it matched. We go forward.
Yeah, amazing. Well, it's going to be super exciting to see what happens over the next 12, 24 months with the new business. And I think anybody and everybody, unless you're living under a rock, is going to see root evidence come through.
We'll shake some up. We'll put some data out there. If people want to follow us on LinkedIn, Robert, myself, we put out edgy topics all the time now because there wasn't much interesting things being talked about in vulnerability management. We might be right, we might be wrong, but we need everybody to start really participating in these discussions because we'll find some truth in there as far as what works.
Yeah, great. And going into the next topic, which is more around your entrepreneurial journey and some of the runs that you've had and what's prompted you to go from certain businesses to others. So you founded WhiteHat at 22 years old, if I'm correct?
22, 23, something like that, yeah.
22, 23, which is remarkably young for founder of a successful security business. What was it at that young age that prompted you to building the business, first of all?
Probably ignorance and arrogance. I was over at Yahoo, and one of the things I learned was one could hack a website and find vulnerabilities in it. It was not terribly difficult at the time. But when you're on the defense side of that equation, you have to try to find more or less all vulnerabilities at all times, multiplied by the number of websites you had, which I think, if my memory serves, was about 600 at Yahoo. It was taking me about 40 man hours to fully test a website. Multiplied by 600 gives you 11 and a half years of work. So you come to two conclusions. One, should anybody try, you're going to get hacked. And you're not going to hire an army of people to do this, even if all the vulnerabilities were to be fixed. So we needed something scalable to test all of the websites that Yahoo had, but everybody else did too. And there was nothing out there that worked or scaled. So I saw a market opportunity because what we were seeing at the time is this was the age where network firewalls were just getting going. And people were put firewalls in place, but then they punched holes for port 80 and 443 called the web. And all the attacks move up the stack to that layer. So I surmise that that's precisely where the attackers were going to go to next. So we're going to have to find and fix the issues before they find and exploit them. So we're going to need a brand new model to do web application vulnerability assessment. So that's what I took on.
Yeah. And WhiteHat has ended up becoming one of the most well-known organizations in the application security space, going through NTT to Synopsys. When you set up the business when you were 22, did you expect it to be as big as it turned out to be?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. There's a colleague of mine, I'll point him out right now because he finds this funny. His name is Caleb Seema. You might know that name because he was a competitor of mine at Spy Dynamics way back in the day. So I have a lot of respect for the guy. And I really forget, one time we were talking back and forth about AppSec and, company aspirations. And I said something that I think upset him. He goes, Jeremiah, that's because you think too small. And I was really upset for a long time. How dare he tell me something like that? And then later on, it occurred to me that he might have been right. And I was like, okay, that sort of thing. So I never thought the company would get that big. And I was like, but the web is that big. This problem is that big. It should be. All right, fine. He was right. So I told him that. It was pretty funny.
Yeah. Was it everything that you expected it to be or completely different?
No, I didn't, as a person, as an individual at that company, I didn't have to spend as much time there as I did. But WhiteHat ended up being, for a lot of people there, like, we don't call people from WhiteHat ex-WhiteHat, they're WhiteHat alumni. It was a very special place for the people there. Yes, of course, we're solving a very big, important problem, but WhiteHat alumni are now spread all over the industry. We created an army of application security professionals, that are, CISOs in different places like that. I don't know really what we did that was so different over there, but it was a community, a family in some regard. I don't.
Yeah. It's I've heard from many folks over the years about the early days of WhiteHat and just the fun and the culture that the business had there. What would you say it's more of obviously a problem being solved, which is super important, good technology, but obviously the culture as well of the business of those early days are kind of three things that led to the success of the organization?
I think it was some amount of the problem we were solving, the era that we were in, the culture of the management team. It wasn't just myself. It was, Stephanie Phone, which was the CEO at the time, which was leading the charge. My agreement with her is that, we needed a really good operational CEO, and given my age, it was just not me at the time. So my deal with her is she would help grow the company and I would give her the best product ever. So that was our agreement, and it did really well. And then, of course, what you have over time is you get to grow hackers. Who gets to do that? You take somebody with very little experience in anything, you go, want to learn to hack banks? I mean, then you have a hacker army, and you have the get out of jail free card to hack banks and retailers and the biggest companies out there, and you get really good at what you do. And what we learned there was that 2 years in that battlefield environment where you're meant to learn and to teach all day, every day, the people that came out of there were as good as anybody ever, just by their ability to practice with impunity.
Yeah. And the security landscape as it is today is extremely different to what it was back then. But what would you say were like the biggest challenges that you faced as you were building that business? And do any of them compare to challenges that you're expecting as you're building the business now?
Many challenges are similar, getting budget, justifying new spend, and things like that. Application security is very new. We grew up in an era of firewalls were supposed to solve all the problems. TLS and SSL were supposed to solve all the problems. Did nothing of the kind. We heard every adage against us because we were a symbiosis between people, process, and tech. So lots of investors in the market said, you can't grow with people. That doesn't scale. I was like, but that's the only way to solve this problem. You can sell people a desktop scanner if you want, but that just means they're going to have to hire the people. That doesn't scale. So it was an effort in proving everybody wrong every single day. But the big one that I learned over time is that, it's a very competitive market. There was nothing I can build, say, or anything like that, because we knew that we were the best. But any competitor, whether they're incumbent or newcomer, could say, no, we're better than they are at 20% of the price. And then all that really happened was we'd end up in bake-offs. Yes, we would win, but it would slow everything down. Because how does the customer, how does the company know who's telling the truth? You have to test. And that's what originated the philosophy of the warranty. They can say whatever they want. But we're going to say something and back it with a financial incentive to bring incentives into alignment. And I knew for a fact our competitors would never do that because, one, their products didn't work, and two, even if they did, they weren't sure. And sure enough, they never did. And we skyrocketed. They did not.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. What would you say is like the biggest lesson that you took from that first run that you still take to today now from a personal standpoint as you're running the business?
It's a good question. I mean, there's so much. There's so much, but I think the one that comes to mind is one I think I talked about on maybe LinkedIn a little while ago, but I don't remember. But when the well, put it this way, the ideal number of employees for a company is 0 or maybe 1. You would ideally like infinite scale with just 1 person, you make all the money. I mean, that's the more ideal. Obviously it's impossible. We all know that, but that's the ideal. So the way I've always looked at it is, if I couldn't execute on my own and I needed to hire, that was a tacit admission that I failed in some regard and I needed help. I need to bring this person in, pay them money for their services to get the business to grow. So in that way, I was never really comfortable with saying someone worked for me. At best, I work with people. And if you really looked at it, I work for them. What I wanted from them is for them to come to WhiteHat to do the best work of their lives. And what my job was to take away all the problems from them that were inhibiting them from doing the best work of their lives. And that's one of the cultures I wanted to instill. And that philosophy worked out really, really well. I wanted people to come in and do amazing work. The work that I did didn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. And how important is the founding team with you? I know like Robert Hansen, for example, has worked with you for a number of years. Talk to me a little bit about that. I know, as we mentioned there, ideally it would be you or one or 0, but yeah, how important is that founding team?
Critically important. So we have a core founding team. Myself, I get to be CEO, which means, set vision, direction of the company, make a decision when there's competing interests, because the only thing that we care about is the best answer wins. Robert Hansen, our snake, his job is to figure out hard technology problems. Like I literally told him before Bit Discovery, the only way we're going to do attack surface management is if we download a copy of the internet first. I mean, that's what I told him. And he's the type that goes, is that possible? And then goes away and does that sort of thing. And so he'll figure out some solutions in prototyping hard problems. Then we send, once we got something vaguely working, we'll send it over to Lex Arquette, and probably one of the best product designers on the planet, to turn ideas and tech into a product that people will love and buy. And then finally, we have Heather Canold, head of operations. So she takes all this tech and this know-how and makes the business a business, everything accounting, finance, legal. So as an operational unit, we're hard to beat because there's not a single one of us that can really do the job of all the others. This for us, this is what it takes.
Yeah.
And we've been working together for 20 plus years. Like we Socratic method really fast and without apology. Because again, we have no ego as far as whose idea was what's the best answer, what's working. If something isn't, it's ejected instantly and put a new idea in place.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know obviously you went from WhiteHat, joined SentinelOne, moved into Bit Discovery. What was it that kind of led you to going again into Bit Discovery after obviously you've had a great run at WhiteHat, moved into SentinelOne, achieved some great things from a endpoint perspective over there, but coming in early again, building it from scratch? Some people would say you're crazy, but what was it that prompted you and the team to do that one?
There is probably a certain amount of psychopathy involved there. It's really, really hard. Again, I like solving hard problems. So does the team. We like cybersecurity a lot. None of us are ready to go back to our respective corners and go sit on a beach with a daiquiri or something like that. And then, everybody likes solving problems, making money, and making an impact. And as long as we like it, and because we all know what we're getting into, as long as we like it, we're just going to keep doing it. And there's no shortage of super hard problems in this space that can be solved. I mean, imagine for a moment that we're able to solve the vulnerability management problem with evidence and remove how 50% of the losses happen. How many people and companies do we protect? I would like to put that on the resume. That's a really good way to spend one's life, I think.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And just as we're wrapping up the podcast now as well, just wanted to go through some 5 quick fire questions and just get your perspective on these. I think it's super exciting. First of all, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received in either work or life?
I'll say work. Life will be a little different. One of WhiteHat's first investors, if not the first one, was a gentleman by the name of John Dean. He was the former chairman and CEO of Silicon Valley Bank, 20, 25 years ago. And he says, he told me two things, probably life and business advice. He says, if all interests are in alignment, the outcome will be assured. Look around the table, who you're doing business with, make sure all interests in alignment, and everything will be just fine. I continue coming to appreciate what he meant by that. And it's something I really focused on, and it served me quite well. The life lesson, outside of, let's say, my parents, he tells me, you're going to make money no matter what you do. But when you do, bring your friends along, because one day you're going to want to get up and play golf, because I guess that's what he did. And you're going to want to have people to do it with you. And if you don't bring them along, they're going to be at work and you'll be alone on the golf course. So hence, I took it to heart. My team comes with me. We work together and we play together, and it's been a good life.
Yeah, amazing. Just switch golf for the jiu-jitsu mat, and then
we all have our different hobbies and things like that. But we spend a significant amount of time in our life together.
Amazing. Question 2: who was your childhood inspiration?
Oh, that's a good one. I think in hacking culture, I've been doing like security stuff, hacking stuff for a long time, learning to code probably since I was 12, but I didn't really have an inspiration. I would read all the books, but it wasn't until I got to DEF CON when I was like 19 or 20, like DEF CON 5 or 6. And I saw Mudge on stage give a presentation. I was like, I want to be like that guy. And that was so cool. And what happened many years later, I was doing one of my jiu-jitsu events, and apparently he picked up training. I have no idea. So he comes to one of the events and goes, "Hi, I'm Mudge." And he, kind of like, a little sheepishly, a little shyly, which was strange to me. He goes, "Can I train with you guys?" And I was like, in a moment, I tried to play it cool, like, "Yeah, Mudge, you can train us." So yeah.
Oh, amazing. Keep RSA in San Francisco or not? If not, where?
Let's be honest. San Francisco is not a fun city to go to. It used to be, just not right now. The problem is, where else do you put it? And that's always the thing. In the US, what cities can hold such a thing? The only other ones are maybe Vegas and Orlando. And I think everybody's sick of going to Vegas too. And Orlando is on the other side of the country, and maybe attendance wouldn't be there. So I think just due to lack of options, it probably has to stay. I don't begrudge them for it. It's a pilgrimage that we all fear, but go to it anyway.
Yeah. And I can imagine I know what the answer is going to be to this one, but if you could change one thing about the cyber industry today, what would it be?
Software liability, without question. And the reason I say so is that this is an incentives problem we have. We look back in the last 5, 10, 15 years of breaches, with rare exception, we knew technically how to solve all these problems preventively. We know. Very few think, whoa, we have no solution to that one. So I think what it comes down to is to incentives. We have this, what we would consider the biggest lie in the history of the internet. I accept. And then there's no liability, no warranty on the software. How do we possibly move cybersecurity forward in a meaningful way when those that create the tech have no fiscal responsibility for it?
Yeah, amazing. And final question, one piece of advice to 18-year-old Jeremiah Grossman, what would it be?
I would say, so it sounds strange, but I would say dream bigger. And just because someone has been doing it 20 years doesn't mean they know any more than you.
Amazing.
Respect your elders, but double check everything. They don't necessarily know what they're doing.
Amazing. Well, Jeremiah, absolute pleasure to have you on. Really enjoyed the conversation. Wish you and the team all the best with the new business. Super excited to see what happens. Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for coming on, Jeremiah.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Elliot. I had a great time.
Cheers.